There's a strange silence that lives inside birthdays, the kind that arrives after the candles go out, when the music feels too loud, the smiles too polished, the questions too kind. It's the moment when celebration starts to feel like a mirror you'd rather not face. Not a mirror of beauty or joy, but of time, of unmet potential, of the quiet erosion of something you can't name. Birthdays are supposed to mark life, yet for many they mark the passage of something subtler, all the versions of ourselves we haven't lived. Each year becomes an annual mirror, less celebration, more confrontation. The calendar doesn't lie, it reflects. It tells you how long you've been circling the same patterns, how many promises you've postponed, how many mornings you've woken with that faint ache of, I thought I'd be somewhere else by now. There's a paradox here, being seen while feeling utterly unseen. Everyone looks at you, yet no one really sees you. The spotlight feels like exposure, not warmth. The chorus of happy birthday becomes a kind of gentle performance anxiety. You smile, they cheer, but something inside you whispers, I don't know who they're celebrating. That whisper isn't self-pity, it's fatigue. The fatigue of keeping a face that no longer fits. Culture tells us birthdays are collective rituals of joy, but for many they expose a private dissonance. The culture says celebrate, while the psyche says grieve. Grieve for the unlived life. Grieve for the dreams deferred not because of failure, but because of fear, loyalty, or confusion. To celebrate, when your soul is in mourning, can feel like betrayal. In a symbolic sense, each birthday is a small personal judgment day. The ego tallies worth against ideals. What have I built? Who have I become? How much of me is still missing? We weigh ourselves not just by years, but by meaning. And when meaning feels unclear, the cake can taste like chalk. There's something sacred hidden in that discomfort. Jung might call it the self, the deeper organizing center of the psyche, demanding a reckoning. The day isn't punishing you, it's inviting you. But invitations from the soul rarely arrive wrapped in glitter. They come disguised as anxiety, restlessness, the urge to cancel plans. If your birthday brings more tension than joy, you're not broken, you're attuned. The discomfort is data. It's your inner life telling you something's been postponed too long. The celebration becomes confrontation, because part of you refuses to keep pretending. Before we move into the next chapter, notice your body. Where does this topic land? The throat? The chest? The stomach? Breathe there. No need to fix, just witness. Stay. Midway through this journey, we'll uncover the quiet mechanism that turns a birthday into a day of inner collapse. And maybe, by the end, into something closer to rebirth. There's a certain ache that comes when a celebration feels foreign in your own skin. You stand among people who love you, or at least mean well, and yet the entire event feels like theater. The laughter is rehearsed, the compliments blur together, and the applause seems to echo in a room that doesn't quite belong to you. This is the quiet wound of birthdays for many adults, the performance of likability, the expectation to appear grateful, fulfilled, easy to celebrate. But underneath the smile, something resists. The hidden wound here is the chronic performance of being someone likable. Birthdays, for those who carry this pattern, turn into stages for persona validation rather than genuine connection. The celebration becomes a mirror for the false self, the version you built to earn safety and belonging. You perform gratitude because it's what's expected. You play the part because, for years, approval has been your oxygen. Carl Jung called this inflation of the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. When it swells beyond balance, the individual's sense of worth becomes dependent on external reflection. Every happy birthday becomes a small hit of dopamine, not because it connects, but because it confirms. The result is emotional outsourcing. Your regulation depends on how well the mask is received. And when the applause fades, so does your center. Dr. Gabor Mate would say that this dynamic isn't vanity, it's survival. The child who learns that love comes through performance becomes an adult who can't rest unless they're approved of. Birthdays then trigger not joy, but vigilance. How do I seem? Am I enough this year? It's not about ego, it's about safety. Avoidance of birthdays is often misread as depression, but sometimes it's integrity. It's the psyche's rebellion against false celebration. To step away from the spotlight can be an act of self-respect, not withdrawal. It says, I will not keep pretending that connection requires a mask. Refusing to perform joy isn't cynicism. It can be the first real gesture of authenticity. Look closely at modern culture and you'll see the same pattern playing out on a grand stage. Instagram-age rituals mirror the Roman triumphs of the ancient world. Parades of public honor masking existential emptiness. The emperor rode through the city hailed as divine, yet behind him stood a slave, whispering, "Remember, you are mortal." Today, our feeds are filled with digital parades, birthday shout-outs, curated gratitude, aesthetic candles, but few moments of real presence. The ritual has become public spectacle, not personal meaning. When the party isn't yours, it's not because you're ungrateful. It's because the person being celebrated doesn't feel real anymore. You sense the dissonance between who they see and who you know yourself to be. The social performance becomes too heavy to sustain. You're not rejecting joy. You're mourning authenticity that was never fully witnessed. That's the thread that leads us deeper. Because behind this resistance, behind the instinct to withdraw from the celebration, lies a quieter grief. Not for lost time, but for the part of you that never got to be real in front of others. And as we'll see next, that loss didn't begin in adulthood. It began long before, in the shadows of childhood, where joy was often measured, tested, and made conditional. Let's follow that thread into the next chapter, into the forgotten child and the pressure that makes happiness feel like a test. Beneath the mask of adulthood, beneath the carefully curated self, there lives a younger figure, often quiet, sometimes defiant, always attentive to approval. This is the forgotten child archetype. Birthdays have a way of calling this child forward, but not with ease. They arrive not as celebration, but as a test. The attention, the smiles, the praise. They are measured against an internalized standard, the ideal child that your parents, or the world, once expected. For many, the pressure to perform happiness is intense. The limbic system, our emotional radar, interprets conditional attention as a threat. Cortisol rises when smiles feel like debts to repay, when laughter becomes a ledger of expectation rather than an expression of joy. The body reads celebration as evaluation. Can you belong? Can you please? Can you survive the spotlight? And the inner child, trained to anticipate rejection, reacts with tension, withdrawal, or subtle defiance. Reddit forums and survivor stories echo this quietly. One man wrote that he hated his birthdays because every smile felt like a debt to repay. It wasn't that he disliked love or attention. It was that the currency of attention had always come with strings. Happiness felt conditional. The child within him, never fully free, resisted the transaction. This pattern is not a flaw, it is a signal. Resistance to celebration can be a subconscious protest against emotional debt, rather than ingratitude. It marks the space where attachment was incomplete, where loyalty was coerced, and where the right to simply exist without performance was denied. Laughter in these moments can feel like betrayal. Inner numbness can accompany social mirth, and yet neither is evidence of weakness. They are markers of unresolved parent-child dynamics, subtle reminders that part of you still carries those early demands. Jung would frame this as a shadow of the inner child, an archetype that holds memory, expectation, and fear. The shadow is not your enemy. It is a keeper of truths you have yet to integrate. In birthdays, it steps forward, uninvited, reminding you of what was never acknowledged, never celebrated. Awareness of this tension is the first bridge to freedom, not to force joy, but to notice the quiet conversation inside you. Where does this pressure land in your body? The stomach tightening, the shoulders rising, the breath holding. Naming the sensation is acknowledgement, not remediation. Presence here is a form of care, a soft answer to a demand that was never fair. This inner tension, between social laughter and private numbness, prepares the psyche for the next encounter. The wound that resists celebration will often surface in another form, the difficulty of receiving. Gifts, attention, recognition, they can trigger shame, suspicion, or defensiveness. The inner child, who learned that love comes with strings, sees care as a test, not a gift. And so, the story of the birthday continues. First the mask, then the pressure, and now the hesitation to receive. The path leads through shame and mistrust, often tied to early relational patterns. Next, we will see how the act of receiving can illuminate this shadow in profound, sometimes painful ways, revealing patterns that are older than any party or calendar. We move forward to the next chapter, into the gift that hurts, and why acceptance itself can be a crucible. There is a peculiar weight in receiving, especially for those who have grown up learning that care always comes with a cost. A birthday gift, a heartfelt card, a kind word. These are supposed to nourish, yet for some they carry the shadow of obligation. The body tightens, the chest constricts, and an old question rises unbidden. Why me? What am I expected to repay? The wound is often tied to the maternal or feminine complex. Early experiences with care, nurturance, or affection can become intertwined with control, conditionality, or manipulation. For someone with attachment dysregulation, oxytocin, the hormone of bonding, is sometimes encoded with guilt. Receiving love triggers the same circuitry that once anticipated judgment, withdrawal, or disappointment. The act of receiving is no longer simple, it is freighted with danger. The myth of Prometheus offers a parallel. The gift of fire illuminated the world, yet it burned the one who possessed it. In a similar way, attention or generosity can feel illuminating and dangerous at once. To accept is to risk vulnerability. To refuse is to maintain control. For some men, gifts evoke echoes of past gaslighting, transactional love, or emotional manipulation. The present is never just a present. It is a mirror of old wounds. Jung might describe this as a shadow of dependency, the part of the psyche that learned to distrust care. This shadow is not condemnation. It is a map of where integration is incomplete. Recognition that the gift hurts opens the possibility of new response, not avoidance, but conscious reception. Within this tension lies a subtle reversal. Rejecting celebration or gifts does not signal ingratitude. It signals self-protection. The psyche is negotiating a boundary that was never clearly drawn in early life. It is an internal test, a quiet insistence that love should not be coercive, that acknowledgement should not come with strings. Notice how this connects to the previous chapter. The inner child, pressured to perform joy, now encounters an external offer. Receiving becomes a stage for unresolved patterns. Each gift, each gesture, is an opportunity for awareness, not to fix or shame, but to notice the shadow in motion. 2 chapters ahead, we will witness a story of trauma and birthdays. A man whose celebration revealed the fragile scaffolding of a bond long conditioned by pain. But before that, there is another shadow to consider, the fear of time itself. The quiet anxiety of counting years, of measuring progress, and of fearing stagnation. The narrative moves now from the difficulty of receiving to the pressure of passing time. In birthdays, every candle becomes a marker, not just of life, but of identity, accomplishment, and the shadow of what might never be. Next, we explore the male fear of stagnation and the psychological weight of counting years. Each birthday candle has a subtle weight. It marks more than years. It measures what has been accomplished, what has been postponed, and what remains unclaimed. For many men, the act of aging triggers a quiet scoreboard in the mind. Every year becomes an opportunity to compare oneself to some internalized ideal, to peers, to a version of the self that seems always just out of reach. The shadow pattern here is comparison and self-measurement. It is not merely concern with aging, but a recurring internal audit. Have I grown? Am I meaningful? Have I used my time wisely? Nietzsche's notion of eternal recurrence, the thought that life repeats endlessly, that mistakes and mediocrity may replay forever, amplifies the pressure. The birthday becomes a rehearsal for mortality itself, a mirror that reflects not only what is, but what might never be. Neurologically, the pattern is reinforced. The brain predicts progress. When it does not appear, a dopamine prediction error signals failure. The body interprets this as a threat to identity. Not reaching the milestones one imagined or failing to feel forward motion can feel like existential collapse. The score isn't simply numerical, it is moral, psychological, and deeply felt. Culture mirrors this fear. Midlife crises, career pivots, impulsive purchases, all become ritualized attempts to reset the scoreboard. The birthday serves as rehearsal, a symbolic checkpoint where the psyche asks, have you begun living, or have you only circled familiar patterns? For those sensitive to inner measurement, the day can feel less like celebration and more like judgment. Beneath this fear of stagnation lies a deeper, unspoken terror, the sense that you have not yet begun, that the authentic life, the one guided by purpose rather than expectation, remains dormant. This is not weakness, nor is it failure. It is a signal. It is the self calling, demanding recognition, nudging toward awareness, toward individuation. In moments like this, birthdays are no longer external events. They are inner confrontations. They ask you to reckon not just with the past year, but with the trajectory of the life you are building. They expose where ambition, desire, and fear intertwine. They reveal the distance between the life performed and the life lived. The candlelight, the counting, the reflection, they all lead to a single recognition. Time cannot be paused, but awareness can be cultivated. The weight of years can become a guide rather than a judgment. And as the birthday continues to illuminate, the psyche invites a deeper reckoning. The candle is no longer just a marker of passing time. It is a small test of presence, of acknowledgement, of inner truth. This brings us to the next chapter, the candle as symbol, the shadow it exposes, and the moment when the self demands renewal. Here, the birthday is no longer rehearsal or measurement. It becomes initiation. Next, we explore the candle test and the shadow it illuminates. There is a quiet, almost ritualistic moment in birthdays that few notice. It comes when the candles are lit and the room falls into stillness. The small flames reflect not only in your eyes but in the contours of your inner life. The candle becomes more than wax and wick. It becomes an archetypal symbol, a test, a mirror of the self. The psyche often uses this moment to demand reckoning. The shadow emerges not as pathology, but as signal. It reminds you of the unexamined choices, the unacknowledged grief, the patterns carried silently for decades. One patient, turning 40, broke down in the middle of his birthday toast. He realized that every wish he had made over the years had been for others, for approval, for safety, but never for himself. The candle's light revealed not failure, but insight. Jung would frame this as a moment of individuation. The tension between outer milestones and inner evolution becomes tangible. You may have passed the markers society sets, career, family, achievements, but the self notices what is left unclaimed, what remains unconscious. Melancholy in this moment is not a signal of deficiency. It is a signal of readiness. Readiness for integration, for alignment, for stepping into the life that belongs to you, not the one performed for others. The candle also illuminates subtle truths about presence. It asks, who are you being in this moment? Are you wishing for approval, for validation, for comfort? Or are you acknowledging the depth of your own journey? The flame casts shadows on the walls, and yet those shadows are not to be feared. They are reminders of what has been neglected, what has been deferred, and what can now be reclaimed. This awareness does not demand sudden transformation. It asks for observation, for recognition, for acceptance. You may notice the tension in your chest, the pause in your breath, the stirrings of grief or longing. Naming it is already an act of reconciliation. The candle does not judge, it illuminates. And in that illumination you have choice, to step into awareness, to honor the unclaimed parts of yourself, to begin a quiet integration. The shadow revealed by the birthday candle is an initiation of sorts, not painful in the sense of punishment, but purifying, revealing, and clarifying. It signals the moment when the day you dread can become the day you return to yourself. In the next chapter, this recognition will find its fuller expression, the silent rebirth that transforms the annual mirror into a passage of integration and renewal. There is a quiet transformation hidden in the discomfort of birthdays. Like a phoenix, the self burns once a year, not as punishment, but as purification. The flames of the candle, the mirror of the calendar, the echoes of expectations, they do not destroy, they illuminate, they clarify, they offer the possibility of integration. The emotional landscape of the birthday, the grief, the tension, the subtle shame, can be understood as a summons rather than a sentence. Each pang of melancholy, each moment of dissonance, carries a message from the psyche. Here lies what is unclaimed, what has been deferred, what demands acknowledgement. The day is not for self-pity. It is for quiet recognition, for a deepening of presence, for the subtle reclamation of authenticity. The real celebration is not external. It is not found in applause, in gifts, in social affirmation. It is found in the silent acknowledgement of being more whole than the day before, in seeing the patterns that have guided your life, in witnessing the shadows that have shaped you, and in naming the parts of yourself that are finally invited to return. Integration is subtle. It may be a pause in the body, a breath held and released, a line of thought allowed to linger. It may be a whispered affirmation, recognition that you have survived, that you have endured, that you continue. The day you once dreaded can become the day you measure presence rather than achievement, alignment rather than approval, self rather than performance. If this mapped your experience, add your signal below. One line is enough. It is a quiet confirmation that others may see what you have just seen. The birthday need no longer be a mirror of anxiety, but a mirror of growth. It can be a return to yourself, a recognition of what is real, a celebration of what has always been waiting within. And in that silence, in that acknowledgement, the transformation is complete, not because the world has changed, but because you have begun to live in alignment with what has always been true.